Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Nosum, and I'm here to break down UFC Vegas 98, which goes down this weekend. We're back at the Apex in Vegas after the pay-per-view event from last weekend. And to be honest with you, from last weekend, it was actually a really good event that was overshadowed, I think, by some really poor officiating. Of course, we had that referee making his UFC debut and was just, mistake after mistake, missing fouls. I think it was the Taira and Cesar Almeida fight. And then, of course, there was some absolutely terrible judging. The Jose Aldo fight, which comes to mind. Then you've got the Pennington-Pena fight. That was quite controversial. And then there was some other scorecards across the board as well. Even Dana White said in the post-fight or post-event interview that, it was appalling, the judges. So yeah, it was a really good event, especially look from Alex Pereira. The dude is an absolute monster, but I think a lot of that event was overshadowed by the officiating. But obviously we'll be back in Vegas now, where it does tend to be a little bit better, but of course it's still controversial most weeks, which is a bit of a shame. But without jumping too deep into that, we've got an event this weekend, and from a paper perspective, again, it's a fight night, so you're not going to get too many huge names on it, but the matchups look absolutely incredible. And again, I think it's going to be another fireworks card. I just hope that it's a card that we can actually, watch and appreciate for what it is afterwards, rather than talking about the negativity regarding any sort of officiating. But yeah, it's a really good event. I'm looking forward to breaking it down. And again, like I say, as always, I'm looking forward to watching it. But just before we jump into those breakdowns, as always, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then you can do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got absolutely everything for every type of bettor. Whether you're somebody that just wants to follow a professional handicapper and bet what they bet, whether you're somebody that, breaks fights down themselves, bets themselves, but just wants a little bit of support whilst doing so, then we've got a recommended bet section for you guys with full written breakdowns detailing why those are recommended bets. So that might help you make a bet. That might, if there was a bet that you're a little bit unsure of and we're going the opposite way, then that might make it a pass for you. That might save you some money. And if you are a fun gambler that just wants to cash the long shot parlays, then we've got a pre-made parlay section, and you can create your own parlay with a list of good options within the fun gamblers section. And of course, every single subscription comes with Bayes AI, our UFC prediction software that gives you a percentage prediction for every possible outcome of every UFC fight, every UFC event, and that's all at MMAplay365.com. Now, with the introduction out of the way, with the promo out of the way, let's get down to breaking some fights. And as always, we start in the main event. We are in the flyweight division, and 5 rounds of this is just incredible. I'm really, really happy that, because look, this could have easily been a fight on the pay-per-view event last weekend, somewhere on the main card where it was 3 rounds, but I'm really happy that they're giving it a 5-round fight. If, of course, we get 5 rounds, but if we do get 5 rounds, I think it's going to be absolutely mental, fast-paced, back and forth. We've got Brandon Royval versus Tatsuro Taira. Now, Tatsuro Taira, 16-0, unbeaten, phenomenal record. He's just starting to make his way into fighting legitimate fighters in the UFC. Obviously, he fought Alex Perez last time out. I would have been interested to see how that fight played out, because Alex Perez was by a million miles the best fighter that Taira had fought. And again, I had some question marks on Taira before that fight, just because, like I say, he'd not fought anybody like Alex Perez, and Alex Perez had a style in regards to the wrestling that could have potentially nullified where Taira's good. And to be honest with you, that fight ended with an injury to Perez with a takedown that Taira was landing. And like I say, unfortunate way to end the fight. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more, but before that happened, Taira was looking good. Taira's, wrestling was okay, his grappling was okay, his striking was okay, and he was fighting, a fighter that's been in and around the top 5-10 in the UFC for many, many years. So, yeah, I was impressed with what I saw from Taira. I would have just liked to have seen the fight extended to see what it was like fighting at that pace against a high-level opponent for a longer period of time. But I do think we're going to get to see that extended period of time here in this fight against Brandon Royval, because I don't think it's a fight that's going to end quickly, and I actually hope it doesn't. Like I say, I really just want to see these guys go at it. Brandon Royval is again another high-level opponent that Tatsuro Taira is going to have to deal with here. He's ranked number 1 in the UFC. He's coming off a win against Brandon Moreno, former multi-time flyweight champion. He's also fought for a championship fight for a belt as well against Alexandre Pantoja. Obviously that didn't turn out for him. I don't think Royval turned up for that fight, if I'm being honest, but like I say, he went against Brandon Moreno last time out and proved that he's still legitimately up there in a conversation at the top of the division. So how these two match up is very interesting, because Taira's game, where he's strongest is within the grappling, and that's exactly the same as Royval. Now, when you get these two stylistic clashes, whether it's two strikers, two wrestlers, two grapplers, you don't always tend to see the fight that you want to see. So when you see two high-level strikers against each other, you want to see them striking. When you see two high-level wrestlers, you want to see the wrestling exchanges. When you see two high-level grapplers, you want to see the grappling, the scrambles on the mat. You want to see both fighters, sort of having moments on top and on bottom to see, to get the best out of the fight, because that's where both fighters are elite. But what tends to happen is both fighters tend to have that much respect for their opponent's, elite game, wherever that might be, and then stay away from that. So, we've seen it so many times before where two wrestlers or two grapplers have had a 15 or 25 minute kickboxing fight because neither want to really engage where the other is strongest, because there's that level of respect there. But I kind of feel that there's going to be no respect here. I absolutely think that Royval wants to roll with Taira, and I think Taira absolutely wants to roll with Royval as well. So I do genuinely believe that we're going to get the fight that we want here, and that's what's going to make it so exciting. But the thing is, when it comes to making a prediction, we're going to have to try and analyse, where each fighter is going to have the moments in this fight. Like, I kind of feel that Royval's scrambles are just super quick. He's so active. He's very difficult to hold down. But I think if anybody can hold him down, it is going to be somebody like Taira, who can match him from a grappling perspective, and also someone that's quite... I would say Taira's one of the bigger, more physical, heavier grapplers in the division. So I think if anyone's going to be able to hold Brandon Royval down, it's going to be Taira. And look, it's not as if Brandon Royval has never been held down before. He's had moments where he's been stuck on his back as well. And I think that Taira's going to be able to sort of replicate that blueprint that other fighters have set out. When you're grappling is as good as Royval's, or maybe a little bit better, you can keep him on his back, even though he's a live wire on the mat and on his back as well. But I think Taira's going to be able to have success on top. I don't think that Royval is going to be able to shoot open mat takedowns against Taira and get Taira down. And this is the thing, I kind of feel whoever's going to be on top, and I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I think whichever grappler is on top is going to be the one that's having success. Like, for some grappling fights, you think, well, actually both defenses are that good that no matter who's on the back, they'll be able to get back up to the feet. But I think if Royval's on his back, I think he's going to struggle getting back up to his feet, and I don't envisage a submission from bottom. But if Royval was on top of Taira, I don't think Royval keeps Taira on his back. I think Taira will be able to stand up, sweep, reverse. Again, I don't see a submission off his back either, but I do think he would be able to at least get up or sweep or reverse if he was on his back. So from a grappling perspective, I am actually giving Taira the edge. Now, when it comes to the striking, Taira is a work in progress, but he has got power. Brandon Royval, again, he's not so much technical with Royval. He crashes the pocket, so he runs in, he closes that distance really fast. That's his style, because he just wants to get at his opponent, make the fight a million miles an hour, and then look for the takedowns within the car crash that's happening. But I think if he tries to crash the pocket with Taira's either going to tie him up, trip him, take him down, take his back maybe whilst he's stood up, or Taira might even land a hard punch and, hurt Royval and drop him, which we have seen Royval dropped and hurt multiple times before. So again, although I think this is going to be an exciting fight, I think we're going to get the fight that we want to see as fans from an entertainment perspective. But I just think Taira has got Royval's number here. I think he's got his number from a grappling perspective, and I think even if the striking is a little bit too overwhelming for Taira, he can tie up and just get Royval on his back if he wants it. The only question marks I've got over Taira is, again, what does he look like in round 5? That's still a question that nobody can answer. We know that Royval can still compete late in fights. Do we know that Taira can? I've seen no evidence, at least over the longer periods of time that he's been fighting, that he will slow down and gas. But again, we just don't know. But from a skill set perspective, like I said, I am giving Taira edges here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Tatsuro Taira to win this fight. And in the next fight, in the co-main event, we've got Brad Tavares versus Junyoung Park. And it's an interesting fight, this one, because, look, Brad Tavares, I think his better days are behind him, but I don't think he's, like, heavily declined, but he's just on his way. So what I mean by that is, look, I don't think that he's a fighter that's as potent as what he was sort of 4 or 5 years ago, but the dude's still in shape, he's still training every day, he's still around killers inside the gym. It's just a little bit concerning that 2 out of his last 3 fights have ended up with him being knocked out. And I just don't think that those knockouts would have happened again 4 or 5 years ago. I think he'd have been much more competitive. However, with that being said, I don't think he's got an opponent here that's going to be that dangerous from a power perspective. So, of course, Junyoung Park's got decent striking, and in 4-ounce gloves, at this level in the UFC, you can never rule out a knockout. But Junyoung Park doesn't have that, that scary one-punch KO power that I think Brad Tavares would get found if it was that type of opponent, if that makes sense. So I think Tavares here has got to deal with a fighter that requires more on, just throwing volume, more pitter-patter strikes, if you like, for a lack of a better phrase. And I think Brad Tavares has that similar sort of style as well. Like, Tavares hits hard, but again, just like Park, he's not really known for his one-punch knockout power. So I think it's going to be a bit of a volume battle, this. But where I think that Park might struggle a little bit is with the wrestling. Like, Brad Tavares, he can be taken down. He's not untakedownable, again, for a lack of a better word. That's probably not even in the dictionary. But Brad Tavares can get taken down, but it's super hard. Like, he's got one of these real good takedown defense records where, good wrestlers and good grapplers have tried to get Tavares down and been unsuccessful in multiple times. He's just very good at defending takedowns, and if you do take him down, he can get right back up to his feet as well. So with Junyoung Park, like, the good news for Park is, he can be a little bit relentless with his wrestling, and he does have a decent gas tank to an extent, but we have seen him tired as well. So I think Park's going to try and shoot takedowns in this fight, thinking he can get Tavares down, or maybe he can get Tavares down and he thinks he can hold him down. But whatever combination of that it is, whether that's he doesn't get him down or he gets him down and can't hold him down, I just think that Park's not going to have too much success with the wrestling and grappling because Tavares is so good defensively. And then when it comes to the striking, I actually think Tavares can keep up with the volume of Park. I think he's a decent striker. He's still got something about him, and I've just not ever been that high on Junyoung Park as a fighter. I was looking back at his previous fights in the UFC because I did think to myself, have I ever even picked Park to win a fight? And I'm sure I will have done somewhere along the lines, like he fought Joseph Holmes and he fought Dennis Tululan. So maybe I picked him in one of those or both of those. I can't really remember without going back and listening to the breakdowns. I know that I've bet against him 3 times, 1-2 as an underdog. So I bet Andre Muniz at like 2-1 against him, which was insane. And then I also bet Gregory Rodriguez as an underdog against Park as well. So I won both of those. The one that I lost was Albert Doraev. I bet Doraev at, I think it was like -150 or something like that. That wasn't a good bet, but I've definitely, from a net perspective, I've definitely got a net profit on Junyoung Park betting against him. So I've never been a massive fan of Park, and again, I'm going to be siding against him here as well. I think that if Tavares didn't have the wrestling and grappling defense that he had, then I would be less inclined to pick Tavares here, because I do think that the striking's going to be close. I think the volume's going to be close. I don't think there's going to be, a massive amount of damage caused on any of the fighters' faces here either. So I think it's going to be one of these fights that probably does go to a decision, and it is going to be razor close, and there's probably going to be 5 or 10 strikes in it. And, I genuinely think it's going to be one of those fights where maybe none of the rounds have a clear winner and they're all like 50-50 rounds and, it goes to a split decision. So, from a betting perspective, if you are looking to bet this fight, then Brad Tavares as the underdog for me is definitely the side to go with, just because I think it's going to be a close decision that could go either way. And on a coin flip, you always want the underdog. Like I say, if it wasn't for Tavares' defensive wrestling and grappling qualities, I think Park would win the fight. But I think Park's going to struggle. And then the gas tank as well. If Park is going in there and shooting a lot of takedowns and being unsuccessful, again, we've seen him slow down a little bit later in fights. I wouldn't say he's got a cardio or a gas tank issue, but I definitely think he can slow down. Whereas Tavares, he's notoriously, had great cardio. He's got a 5-round style himself. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a close and competitive decision, but I'm going to be siding with Brad Tavares to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Grant Dawson versus Rafa Garcia. And for me, it's quite a simple one, this, because I think Grant Dawson, and again, I don't mean any disrespect to Rafa Garcia here, there's just levels in MMA, and I'm sure you can tell which way I'm going already, and I think you'd have been surprised, anybody listening, that if I'd have gone the other way. But look, I think Grant Dawson is still in his rebuild process here after getting knocked out by Bobby Green. Obviously, Dawson was looking phenomenal up until then. Even that Damir Ismagulov fight was completely and utterly dominant. And Damir Ismagulov, I know he left the UFC and there was a bit of a strange scenario around why he left, and then he did have another fight, I think, outside the UFC. I'm not really sure exactly what went off, and I'm not going to get into it either, but from before Grant Dawson fought against Ismagulov, I bet Grant Dawson as an underdog, so that tells you what everybody thought about Ismagulov and the qualities that he has. And I agree that he was a solid fighter, but Grant Dawson really made that fight look easy to a point where people thought, well, okay, Grant Dawson is going to probably surge now. They put him against Bobby Green. That's that gatekeeper type of fight where if you beat a Bobby Green, then you're on your way to the top of the division. And then he got knocked out. Again, I bet Bobby Green at like plus 350 or something in that fight as well. So I did cash Bobby Green there. But since that loss, obviously, Grant Dawson was put against Joe Solecki. I think that was a tailor-made fight for Grant Dawson to get back on the winning streak. And I think this is a tailor-made fight for Dawson as well, which to me indicates, I'm very aware of how matchmakers work. I work very closely with, the elite matchmakers all over the world. And I do think that Grant Dawson is probably being put in a rebuild process here to get him back to where he was before he lost to Bobby Green. And I think Rafa Garcia is the next sort of stage of that rebuild process. I think when you look at style versus style, the striking I would probably edge to Rafa Garcia, but it's very, very close. Like if this was a 15-minute kickboxing fight, then it would be a very close decision if there was obviously no knockout. Again, Garcia probably holds more power, but a little bit more aggression as well. But I don't envisage this fight having too much, back and forth in regards to, long striking exchanges. I think Dawson's going to go straight in there with the takedowns, with the wrestling and grappling, and that's where Rafa Garcia is going to be in and over his head, in my opinion. I think Dawson's going to be able to get takedowns when he wants them. I think he's going to be able to, use some good grappling in this fight. If he doesn't get Garcia out of there, which to be fair, there is a chance of that, whether that's ground and pound or a submission, but if it does go late into the third round, maybe Garcia can have a little bit more success a little bit later on, because again, this is the other thing, I don't think Grant Dawson has got that 5-round cardio yet where he's going to be able to push hard and wrestle hard with the style that he's got for a full 5 rounds, because we have seen him slow down in 3-round fights. So maybe if Dawson doesn't get Garcia out of there, Garcia can have a better fight later in the fight. But again, Dawson's so tough and he's so difficult to get out of there. Even if he is tired, he'll still push through barriers. He's still going to eat some shots to be able to, get close and get his takedowns. So I just don't think Garcia can do enough late to change what's happened earlier in the fight. And that's even if Dawson does get tired. He is going to be, working on that cardio, that gas tank, and improving where he's sort of fell a little bit short earlier in his career. But I think it's a good fight for Dawson. I think he's on a rebuild process. I think that's this fight's the next stage of that. And I just think he's going to be too much for Garcia. So for those reasons, I'm picking Grant Dawson to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Cory McKenna versus Julia Polastri. So Julia Polastri is stepping in on short notice. I think she's had a few weeks, if I'm being honest. It's definitely not a full fight camp, though. But it was supposed to have been Polyana Viana fighting Cory McKenna. So I think Cory McKenna has actually probably got a little bit of a more simpler fight than Polyana Viana. And that's just because Viana can be really opportunistic with the submissions. And I just feel that from a finishing perspective, at least, Viana would have been the more dangerous fight for McKenna. But even with Julia Polastri stepping in, Polastri's got a good strike. She's really well-rounded is what I was about to say. She's got good striking. She's got takedowns. She's got grappling. I think she's going to be the better striker than McKenna. But looking at the improvements that McKenna's making, and, she's got a boxing coach out there in America as well. You see some of the videos that she's putting on Instagram. Her boxing's looking really sharp, so it's definitely an area where McKenna is improving, and I kind of like McKenna as a fighter. I know obviously she doesn't win every fight, but she's got that good all-round style and that winning mentality where even when she might be in a fight that's maybe not as favourable for her as previous fights, she'll still find ways to win. So I like McKenna as a winner. But make no mistakes about it, I think Polastri is going to be the physically bigger fighter, probably stronger as well. She's going to have the longer reach, and she does have, at least from the tape, probably the slightly better striking over McKenna. But again, McKenna's improving, so that might change in this specific fight. How I'm seeing this fight is I just think it's going to be razor close wherever it goes. I think the striking's going to be close. I think Polastri probably packs a little bit more power. I think McKenna will be striking from trying to accumulate volume to close the distance, to get into the takedowns, to take Polastri down. But then Polastri's got takedowns herself. I just think wherever the fight goes, it's going to be very, very close, very, very competitive. And although I don't see either fighter really edging out, like clearly edging out sort of 2 out of the 3 rounds should it go to a decision, I do think if any fighter was to start edging maybe a round or maybe look a little bit better in any of the other rounds, it is more likely to be McKenna. So as you can tell probably from the tone of my voice, I'm not super confident about this prediction. I genuinely think that Polastri's a good fighter as well, even though I've already called Cory McKenna's style as a bit of a winning type of style. So yeah, I just think it's going to be another really close, razor close competitive decision. If there is a finish, then again, it could probably be either side, whether that's a submission. I think if it's going to be knockout, it's more likely to be Polastri. If it's a submission, maybe more likely to be McKenna. But I think there's no real finishing upside on either side. So if there is a finish, it could genuinely be both fighters. And if it goes to a decision, I think it's going to be close and competitive. But I just like, as I've said already, that sort of winning style from McKenna. And I think if any fighter is going to, make anything clear in this fight, it is more likely to be McKenna over Polastri. So for those reasons, I'm picking Cory McKenna to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Daniel Rodriguez versus Alex Morono. So Daniel Rodriguez, I think he's taken a big step down in competition here, not just from his last fight. Well, obviously, Kelvin Gastelum, is one of the best fighters that's been in and around the middleweight and welterweight division for years, but I just mean in general, because what happened with Daniel Rodriguez is he went on a win streak, he was looking absolutely phenomenal, and then he got a couple of big wins in spots where, maybe he wasn't favoured or maybe the UFC thought he would struggle, and that bumped him quite close to the sort of like the top of the division, the top 5, the top 10. So then Daniel Rodriguez has had 3 fights fighting, 3 really good opponents against Neil Magny, Ian Gary, and then obviously last time out Kelvin Gastelum. And these fighters, maybe not Magny as much, but Magny's like a super solid gatekeeper in the division. Like, he is a very tricky fighter to deal with, and he's had so many fights where fighters have gone in as a favourite against Magny and everybody thinks that they're going to run all over him. Then Magny's just completely halted it, stalled the fight, made it ugly, made it gritty, grindy, dirty, and ended up, upsetting the public in regards to where they thought the fight was actually going to play out and who was going to win. So you can't take that away from Magny. He's still a fighter that's been in and around, the top of the UFC division for absolutely years. Obviously, Ian Gary is a potential title contender, maybe a potential champion in some people's eyes. And then Gastelum's fought for multiple titles, has been at the top of the division for years. So Daniel Rodriguez went into a brand new level of fighting in the UFC, and he lost all 3. There's no shame in losing those 3 fights, but what it did tell you is that his ceiling isn't within the top of the division. I think his ceiling is within the top 15. I think he could beat fighters maybe ranked from 10 to 15. I think he'll struggle from 10 onwards, but I think Rodriguez has got a big step down in competition here because we finally know where his ceiling's at. So now he's fighting a guy like Alex Morono, who is in and around where Rodriguez is at. But I've got concerns of Alex Morono in regards to a decline. I think Morono is showing... Look, I know it was a short notice fight for him against Niko Price, but Alex Morono was always one of those fighters that you could rely on short notice. His weight was always good. He was always in the gym. His cardio was a weapon as well. And then he goes in there against Niko Price, and it's probably the worst that I've ever seen Alex Morono look. You know, he was absolutely done after round one in regards to his cardio. Niko Price is an absolute shadow of his former self as well, a shell of his former self, sorry. So I don't think that Niko Price is anywhere close to being where he's been for years, yet Niko Price just had so much success against Alex Morono. Morono was getting beat up, he was tired. And I just look at Daniel Rodriguez and the performance that he had against Kelvin Gastelum, the slick boxing combinations, you know, putting 2, 3, 4 punches together, landing hard punches on Gastelum, which, to be fair, Gastelum took, but he's got that Mexican bloodline where, you know, he's just tough as shit and it's really hard to put him away. And I just look at that performance, landing 100 plus strikes against Kelvin Gastelum, slick combinations, hard punches landed, and I just put Rodriguez in that situation against Morono. I just don't know, A, if Morono will be able to take those shots, B, if Morono will even be able to keep up with him from a volume perspective. And I just think Rodriguez is going to have a serious physical and speed advantage over Morono here as well. And although Morono, I think, is going to be very competitive early in this fight, I think the longer the fight goes on, the more Rodriguez starts to open up with his combinations, the more punches he lands on Morono. I'm just expecting Morono just to break a little bit methodically Rodriguez breaking Morono methodically throughout the rounds and just looking better the longer the fight goes on. And I think if Morono tires or gets hurt and can't perform in the way that he did against Niko Price, I think Rodriguez will eat him up and end up knocking him out. So yeah, I think it's a fight where Rodriguez is taking a big step down. I think it's a good fight for him. I think Morono's potentially on a decline. The advantage that I would give Morono in this fight is, I think the top side grappling on top of Rodriguez is probably where Morono could have some success, but Morono doesn't shoot many takedowns. I think it's like 0.36 per 15 minutes. Completion rate, I think, is mid 20% as well. So it's not as if he's got the wrestling chops and the relentlessness and shooting enough takedowns to be able to capitalize on those advantages that he does have. And again, Rodriguez is no slouch. You know, he knows how to get back up to his feet. But I just feel that if you're looking at any part of this fight where Morono has success, it's topside grappling. And again, I just don't see that happening. I think he'll be there and in the face of Rodriguez early in this fight, but I expect Rodriguez's speed and physical advantages to start really shining through. And then once the power and the combinations and the boxing starts coming in from Rodriguez, I think he's going to really start piecing Morono up. So for those reasons, I'm picking Daniel Rodriguez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Josh Fremd versus Abdul Razak Alhassan. Now, with Alhassan, it's the same old story with him. You know, he's got ridiculous power. He's an athlete. He's going to come forwards with fast, hard, big shots, looking to overwhelm his opponent and knock them out. And the flip side to Alhassan is, if you can weather that storm, potentially get him tired or even just level change and take him down, then that's when you're going to have massive advantages over Alhassan, who, you know, typically in his UFC career, if he has been put on his back, he's not really been able to, you know, get back up to his feet, at least not easily. And Josh Fremd has got a bit of a wrestling game to him. You know, he can wrestle, he can get on top of his opponents. And yeah, it's one of those where, does Alhassan overwhelm him and catch him early, or does Fremd either weather a storm and then batter a tired Alhassan, or does he take him down within that storm, completely take that storm away from Alhassan, and then the doubt starts setting in for Alhassan? Can I explode again? Can I come forwards? Can I really try and overwhelm him? Because is he just going to take me down and put me on my back again? So it's one of these fights where I wouldn't exactly call it a 50-50 fight, but from a style perspective, you look at Josh Fremd and he's absolutely got paths to victory. It's just, with Alhassan, I normally just favour Alhassan unless he's fighting like a real high-level fighter in the division, sort of like top 10 type of fighter. I would normally favour Alhassan in regards to being able to do that overwhelming on the opponent. And of course, there's always going to be, you know, exceptions to that clause. So you've got the guys like Jacob Malkoun, for example, that was just able to get the takedowns. And I actually think when Alhassan fought Malkoun, I don't think people realised how good Malkoun actually was before that fight, so just expected Alhassan to run through him. And look, like I say, Fremd's got a bit about him as well, but with Alhassan being the one coming forward and Fremd not being a predominant wrestler and grappler, I think Alhassan will be able to, create that storm, overwhelm Fremd. If Fremd's the one that's moving backwards, then obviously he's going to struggle to get that offensive wrestling going as well. And for me, I don't think Fremd's going to be able to stop the storm with the wrestling. I think it'll be a case of does he weather it or not? And I just don't think he does. So for those reasons, I'm picking Abdul Razak Alhassan to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Chidi and Njokuani versus Jared Gooden. Now, when I first saw this fight put together, I was like, look, I think Njokuani is going to be way too much for Jared Gooden here. But Jared Gooden's one of these fighters where it's really hard to get a read on him because he wins fights where you would expect him to lose because maybe he's on a little bit of a losing streak, and you can sort of see where the ceiling's at with Gooden. So he'll win the fights that you're surprised that he's won, but then he'll lose. He's inconsistent as well, so he'll have fights where, look, maybe he's missed weight, he's had an issue with weight a couple of times, and maybe he misses weight and he looks terrible, and there's just inconsistency there with Gooden. Like I say, he'll win fights that we believe he should lose, and then he'll lose fights that he should be winning. So it's a tough one to be really accurate when it comes to predicting these fights. And the thing is with Njokuani, he doesn't make life any easier for you either. Like when he came into the UFC, I'd won a couple of bets on Njokuani looking like an absolute monster, but then I lost a couple of bets after that thinking that he was someone that he's not. And again, I don't mean that disrespectfully. I probably overshot Njokuani of where I thought he was at. Like I thought, look, this guy's a high level kickboxer with the touch of death. He's got BJJ improvements have happened over the years. He's a black belt. He's really like tricky on the mat. I thought this guy could be the entire package. He's also huge, well built physically as well. So I thought Njokuani, he's going to be up there. So maybe I overshot it. But with Njokuani, again, talking of inconsistencies, like he's there as well. He can be broken to the body, and He's definitely a front runner. He'll come out fast and hard, but when he's met with a real quality fighter in front of him that can sort of maybe take the punches that he's landed and then give a little bit back himself, I don't know whether he mentally breaks or whether something wasn't right in the fights that he's lost. But like you look at the Oleksiejczuk fight, Njokuani had him in all types of issues. He was landing hard punches. He was probably, I think Njokuani, if he'd landed another couple of shots and was a bit calm and a bit patient, he might have been 10-20 seconds away from finishing that fight, but he didn't finish it, and then he just crumbled from there. Like it's like he literally stepped off a cliff and just fell. And it's that type of performance that makes me not as confident, because the one thing Jared Gooden won't do is step off a cliff and just have that, just look great and then suddenly just completely fall. And I just don't think you get that from Jared Gooden. You're going to get a resilient fighter, a tough fighter that's going to be in there the entire way, whether he's getting beaten up or not. Whereas Njokuani, I think the best way to describe him, he's a great hammer and maybe not as great of a nail. And again, I don't mean that to sound disrespectful, because these are fighters at the highest level. I'm just comparing him to other UFC fighters. And I think with Jared Gooden, he's a good hammer and a good nail, and that might be enough here. But still, when you look at the quality, the quality of the skill set between both fighters, I'm leaning towards Njokuani again, because look, I know, like I say, Gooden's a good hammer and a good nail and he's going to be in there, but Njokuani's level is high compared to Gooden, like seriously good striking. He's got power to go with it as well. He could probably get Gooden down to the mat and do good work on top of Gooden as well. So I think the skill set's there for Njokuani. It just makes me have a little bit of pause and a little bit of hesitancy, because he can be got at if things aren't going his way. So it's a tentative pick and prediction, but I am picking Chidi and Njokuani to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got CJ Vergara versus a UFC newcomer. We've got Ramazan Bek Temirov. Now, with that type of name from Uzbekistan as well, by the way, you would automatically be assuming he's one of these beast wrestlers that's just relentless, that will hit double legs in the middle of the cage and, cause serious problems on top grappling. And that's actually not his predominant style. He is more of a kickboxer, loves his spin attack. Spin back kick to the body seems to be one of his favoured attacks, super fast, lands it with good accuracy as well, but then can sneak that heel a little bit higher up and go to the face at times. So he's definitely more of a kickboxer, but we have seen moments of him where he's had to grapple, and you can see, even in the small moments when you're really looking at it, you can see that he's got a very knowledgeable grappling game. I've not seen too much from a wrestling perspective, but I know that, like I say, when there's been moments where he's dropped his opponents, he's got on top and then there's a bit of a scramble, you can see that he's doing really tricky high-level things like, grabbing the ankles and looking to try and tie the legs down, and those are initial signs of he knows what he's doing on the mat, so he's got a level of grappling. And I'd be shocked, coming from the region that he's from, that if he doesn't have a level of wrestling as well. I only watched I think 2 or 3 of his fights, so I haven't put hours and hours into him to see if there is more wrestling there, I'll be honest. But like I say, I saw what I needed to see for this fight in the tape that I watched. From a striking perspective, he's fast, he's hard, he's powerful. He'll crash into the pocket. He'll eat punches. He'll eat 1 or 2 punches if it means landing one himself. But he's genuinely got one punch deadly power. I wouldn't say, he's not knocked anybody out, flatlined him in one punch, but, he can hit you and drop you and hurt you hard. And then when you get back up, he'll hit you hard again and you'll drop again. So he's got power in his hands. With CJ Vergara, I think CJ Vergara is always a tricky fight for everybody at this level in the UFC, because he's so well-rounded. Like, he's a decent striker, he's a decent wrestler, he's a decent grappler, he's got good cardio, he's always going to be game for a fight. So I think he's going to fight Temirov. I think it's going to be a really good fight, but I just don't see Vergara not getting clipped by Temirov, because the thing is with Vergara, yeah, he'll shoot his takedowns, but I don't think his wrestling is going to be good enough to be able to wrestle Temirov relentlessly for 15 minutes, or if he takes him down, I don't think his topside grappling is going to keep Temirov on his back for long periods of time. So I do think it's going to be a fight that's won and lost on the feet. And when they come and start exchanging, which both fighters will be game to exchange, I just think Temirov's going to land the harder, cleaner punches that are going to land on the button, drop Vergara. I could see Vergara dropping a couple of times, even if he's not knocked out and it goes to a decision. I think Temirov will drop him along the way and steal the rounds, but I do think there's a good chance of at some point Temirov either knocking him out or just winning by TKO with some ground and pound once Vergara's had enough. So for those reasons, I'm picking Ramazanbek Temirov to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a really intriguing fight actually between Jonathan Pearce and Pat Sabatini. Now, what really makes this fight interesting, in my opinion, is from a wrestling grappling perspective, because both fighters are predominantly wrestlers and grapplers. Now, the thing is with Sabatini, when you get at Sabatini, you don't normally get at him by out wrestling him or out grappling him. You get at Sabatini by, being aggressive, getting in his face, landing hard punches. He's been hurt, he's been dropped and knocked out before. So I think that's the way you get at Sabatini. And with Jonathan Pearce, again, I'm using this word a lot. What's really interesting is, even though Pearce is a predominant wrestler and grappler, he's also a very aggressive striker. And he's a striker that, from a defensive perspective, has got, there's definitely concerns there. Like, he leaves his head on the centre line. But I don't think Sabatini is going to be that fighter to really exploit the striking defence of Pearce. So I think Pearce is going to be okay from a striking defence perspective. I don't think that he's in too much danger of getting caught with something hard and knocked out. But from Sabatini's side, because of that, Jonathan Pearce can push forward a little bit heavier than what he normally will do. And there's definitely concerns from Sabatini's durability. But then the thing is with Pearce, even if Pearce hurts his opponents, he's one of these types of fighter that he'll rock his opponent, maybe get him on shaky legs a little bit against the cage, but then bang, just shoot a takedown, because that's his natural reaction. And I just think that with Pearce being heavy with the wrestling and grappling, I'm just not sure he's going to be able to get the better of Sabatini. I think Sabatini probably is a better wrestler. I think he is going to be a better grappler. So when you're looking at which fighter is going to have success and where, I think if Jonathan Pearce gets on top of Sabatini, I think Sabatini will be able to get back up to his feet. I don't think it'll be super easy. and he'll have to deal with Jonathan Pearce holding, that grip won't break and he'll still be there. So when you get back up, he'll either still have a hold of a single leg or a double leg and he'll try and take you back down. I think Sabatini might have to deal with a lot of that early on, but I think once Pearce starts wearing a little bit, which he does, and you look at the Christian Rodriguez fight, like Jonathan Pearce heavily wrestled and grappled in that fight, and he had a big physical advantage. It was Christian Rodriguez moving up in weight as well on short notice, but eventually Pearce started slowing down and tiring out, and then Rodriguez started having some success. So now you replace that with Sabatini, who is a legitimate wrestler and grappler. I think Sabatini, just mind your P's and Q's early on from a striking perspective. I think you're going to have a little bit to deal with the wrestling and grappling early in the fight as well. But I don't think it's anything Sabatini shouldn't be able to be prepared for and deal with. And then the longer the fight goes on, I think Sabatini's the one that starts shooting the takedowns, that's pinning Jonathan Pearce's back against the cage and sinking a hook in and, getting him down to one knee and trying to take his back and threatening a choke and just grinding away on Pearce. So, like I say, it's a really interesting fight. I think if Pearce is going to win the fight, I think he's going to be able to catch Sabatini. I think that's the way, in regards to punching, the striking, I think that's the way that Pearce wins. But if Sabatini just remains safe from that, or maybe if Pearce is coming too aggressive, just, tie up with Pearce, shoot a takedown. I think Pearce is then going to have some more success in the fight with his, relentless, gritty style of, the wrestling and, the running the clock down and the pressure. I think that Pearce will have a little bit of success there, but the longer the fight goes on, I think the more Sabatini grows into it. And then, like I say, from a skill set perspective, if this fight, which in my opinion it will be, is won and lost within the wrestling and grappling, well, I think Sabatini's the better wrestler, I think Sabatini's the better grappler, and I think Sabatini's got the better cardio. So that leads me to a Sabatini win. But like I say, it's going to be one of them where Sabatini, in my opinion, is going to be playing catch-up throughout the entire fight, because I think he's definitely dropping round one. Not dropping as in like getting knocked out, but I think he's definitely more likely to lose round one, as in the round itself. And then I think maybe at the start of round two, it's going to be a bit tricky. So I think Sabatini will have a game of catch-up, but I do think he catches up. And for those reasons, I'm picking Pat Sabatini to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Niko Price versus Themba Gorimbo. And again, like I mentioned earlier on in the Daniel Rodriguez and Alex Morono breakdown, I think the same issues that I had with Alex Moreno, I've got with Niko Price. I think he's an absolute shell of himself. I think he's still got something about him. He's still going to be fun. He's still going to be exciting. But I just think he can be got at in so many different ways, in ways that he wouldn't have been able to be got at sort of like 4 or 5 years ago. And that's just father time in MMA. And, I'm not saying that Price is super old, but he's been in so many wars, like the Luque War, and then, a war with Alhassan as well. And, there's so many more examples. He's just been one of those fighters. There's a reason why Niko Price has been in the UFC for so many years. And that's just because the matchmakers all love him, because he goes out there and scraps. He's kill or be killed. And unfortunately, when you kill or be killed, when that's your style, even in the fights that you kill, you're still going to be getting hit a lot. And then there's going to be the fights that you killed as well, where again that's going to affect your ability. And I think it's all just catching up with Niko Price. Now, the thing is with Themba Gorimbo, Gorimbo's not exactly a typical striker, so maybe Price might fancy his chances against Gorimbo striking. The thing is, Gorimbo's got sneaky power because he has got a couple of knockouts in there where you've not really expected it. But where Gorimbo's best is the takedowns, the wrestling, the grappling, and I think Themba Gorimbo's going to be able to get at Price there relatively easily. And, well, maybe not relatively easily, I just don't think there's going to be too much of a sort of a pushback from Niko Price. I just think that there's going to be a level there with Gorimbo's wrestling and grappling where he's going to be able to get at Price. And then even with the striking, if Price is reckless with Themba Gorimbo, look, Gorimbo could potentially knock him out as well. So this is why I do think it's a good fight for Gorimbo. He's another fighter, like I mentioned with Grant Dawson earlier on, that I think the UFC are on a real build-up process with Gorimbo. A lot of people have heard shit on Gorimbo over the last few years, saying that at some point, he's going to be available to be beaten and he's being overhyped and, he's going to be easy to fade as he moves forward. But I've always disagreed with that, and I did bet against Gorimbo last time out against Brahimaj. Again, it wasn't a good bet, but Brahimaj was a good price. So again, it's the betting game. You don't always pick winners. You bet where the value is. And Although it turned out that there was no real value on Brahimai's line. You can't be right 100% of the time. But I do believe that Gorimbo is a fighter that's got real qualities about him. And I don't think he's a fighter that you should be waiting on just to fade. Is he going to lose a fight in the UFC? Well, yes, at some point he's going to step up in competition to the point where he is going to lose. I don't think he's a future champion. But I do think that he's a fighter that could get very close. But to get very close, you're going to have to take a massive step up at some point. And I think that's probably the fight that he loses. But I don't think it's going to be this fight against Niko Price. I think that, like I say, Gorimbo, from a finishing upside, even though Price is super aggressive and dangerous, I think Gorimbo's got the finishing upside with the knockout. I think Gorimbo's got the finishing upside with ground and pound or a submission on the mat. But then Gorimbo's got the huge advantages, in my opinion, in the wrestling and grappling. So, yeah, look, I don't think Price is... I know he won last time out against Alex Morono, but I do think he is a shell of himself. And I think if this was a fight 5 years ago, or if this is the Niko Price of 5 years ago, be a much different prediction, but it's not. So for those reasons, I'm picking Themba Gorimbo to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got one of the fighters that I enjoy so much. I enjoy watching Chris Huggy Bear Barnett fight inside the cage, and he's fighting Junior Tafa. And unfortunately, it's a prediction that I am going to be a little bit disappointed to give, just because of where I feel like this fight is going to play out, how it's going to end. And unfortunately, I do think we're going to see Huggy Bear at some point knocked out, which is a bit of a shame. Like I say, I love Huggy Bear, the energy, the vibes, even inside the cage, he's just super fun. He's definitely one of those fighters that you could absolutely imagine yourself out at a bar, having a beer with, and just having the absolute best of times. Yeah, I love Chris Huggy Bear Barnett. I think he's a quality guy, and he's super fun. His personality is fun, but unfortunately, personality doesn't win your fights, and this is where the issue is here. Because look, I think Barnett's going to be absolutely huge in regards to having a weight advantage over Junior Tafa. Junior Tafa, the way you beat him is by taking him down and not letting him back up. So maybe Barnett can, and Barnett has done that in previous fights, when that's been his path to victory. The thing is, he normally takes a bit of a beating early on, and that's where I've got issues, because I don't think Barnett's just going to come straight into this fight and shoot a takedown and take Tafa down. He should absolutely try that. But even if he does, I think there's going to be something up the middle from him, whether it's a knee or an uppercut. I think Tafa is going to be very aware that the only way Barnett is actually going to win this fight is by taking him down, and Barnett's not a predominant wrestler and grappler. Now, I'm not saying Barnett can't land something crazy on Tafa and knock him out. I just think it's unlikely with the level that Tafa's at in regards to his striking. I just don't think he gets caught with something flashy that knocks him out. And yeah, look, maybe he's caught with a big overhand that knocks him out. But again, with the quality he's got as a striker, he shouldn't be getting caught by that. I think Tafa's going to be landing some hard straight punches early on. I don't think he's going to pack too much power into them, but I do think that Chris Barnett's going to feel the power on the straight punches, even though there's not a lot behind him. And then the more Barnett feels them, the more hesitant he is. I think that's when Junior Tafa is going to start stepping forward and putting some real power behind his shots. And I do think he catches Barnett probably early in this fight and knocks him out. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Like I say, there's a path to victory there for Barnett. I just don't think there's a high enough probability of him hitting that path to win. And yeah, it's going to suck to see. I hope Barnett stays around and the UFC give him a little bit more of a fun fight for him afterwards. And of course, if he does win and proves me wrong, then there'll be nobody happier apart from Chris Barnett than myself. So yeah, I am siding with Tafa, though. I think Tafa finds a knockout early on. So for those reasons, I'm picking Junior Tafa to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is an interesting one as well. One that I've been really looking forward to breaking down. We've got Dan Argueta against Cody Haddon. So Cody Haddon is a fighter coming from the Contender Series, the latest season, if I am right in saying that. And what I like about Cody Haddon, he's got real good foundations in the bases of his game for mixed martial arts. So he's a very good boxer. He throws in combinations. He's got power. He's also a BJJ black belt, and you can see he's got very good qualities when it comes to his grappling as well. So this is a guy that's 26 years old. He'll still be improving. He's not near his prime. He's got slick boxing. He's got good grappling. So he's at some point, he is going to start being an absolute nightmare in the UFC for some opponents. And where I'm at with this fight is the amount of fighters. I mean, this isn't my first rodeo, and I'm sure if you're listening and you're tuning in, it's not your first rodeo either. How many times over the last X amount of years have we seen a super hyped fighter that's looked absolutely incredible and phenomenal on the Contender Series come into his first UFC fight very soon after he's looked phenomenal and incredible on the Contender Series, and he's fought a tough, gritty, UFC experienced fighter that he's favoured over, that everyone's absolutely hammering the betting line because he's going to absolutely smoke this UFC vet, and then the experienced fighter ends up, sort of causing that upset, if you like, beats the hyped fighter to the point where everyone's shocked, but then it's the next fight that super hyped fighter performs extremely well and then goes on an incredible run. How many times have we read that story? How many times have we seen this scenario? We've seen it over and over and over again. And I kind of think it's going to happen in this fight. And the reason why is because, look, I've mentioned the boxing of Haddon. I've mentioned the grappling of Haddon. What I've not spoken about is the wrestling, and I think that's what's going to be the issue in this fight. When I watch tape on Haddon, his wrestling's okay. There's nothing wrong about it, but I do think it's a work in progress and something that is going to get better, because once Haddon bridges that boxing to the grappling with the wrestling, I think he's going to be an absolute nightmare in this division. But right now, I don't think that bridge is built. And blending the boxing into the takedowns, I just don't think he's going to be clean enough to beat Dan Argueta. Like, Argueta's got a wrestling background. You can see he's built as like a power wrestler as well. He's short, wide. He's got insane cardio. Although he can gas himself out when he goes too hard, but he's got insane wrestling cardio. He's relentless with the wrestling. If he gets you down, his grappling's super tricky to deal with as well. This is what I mean. I don't think if Argueta gets Haddon down, I don't think Haddon's just going to sweep him. Or even if Haddon gets on top of Argueta, I think Argueta's going to be able to get back up. I think Argueta's grappling is so tricky. I think his wrestling is going to be, or should be, way ahead of Cody Haddon's. And I think that's going to show. Where Cody Haddon's going to be able to get at Argueta is within the striking, because, like I say, Haddon's got good boxing. He's fast and he throws in combinations and he puts 3, 4, 5 punches together, which is what you love to see as a striker. Argueta can be hittable. He keeps his head on the centre line and you can get at him with the striking. That's going to be where Cody Haddon gets at Argueta, potentially hurts him and knocks him out. But the thing is, even though I've just said that about Argueta in regards to him being hittable, he still only absorbs like less than 2 strikes per minute on average, which is an insane statistic. His striking defense, I think, is at around 50%. So again, that's hit and miss. And he's the underdog. So he's going to be the underdog for a reason. And I think the way Haddon wins is within the boxing. But I think the wrestling's going to have so much to say about this fight, to the point where I think it's going to be won and lost with Argueta just being relentless, overwhelming Haddon. It's Haddon's UFC debut. He's not going to have fought a fighter at the level of Argueta with the skill set that Argueta's got within the wrestling and grappling. And I think it might just be too much on the night. Would I be shocked to see Haddon win? Well, no, because like I've already said, his striking's good. His wrestling's good, and he's a young, good fighter. I can understand the hype about him, but I've just seen this situation happen so many times before, and for that reason, I am going to side with the experienced UFC fighter. So, for those reasons, I'm picking Dan Argueta to win this fight. And the final fight to break down, I'm actually really looking forward to this fight as well. I think it's a super good fight. We've got Clayton Carpenter versus Lucas Rocha. So, Lucas Rocha, coming off the Contender Series, he was getting completely like nullified round 1, taken down, couldn't really do too much in regards to have an effect on that first round. But then second round came out, bang, knee during his opponent sort of maybe thinking about a level change, sparks his opponent out, and basically that just sums up Rocha as a fighter. Like you look outside of that Contender Series fight, he can be taken down, but when he's taken down, he doesn't settle. To his credit, he does try and get back up to his feet, but he can be controlled on the mat. But on the feet, he's just such a live wire type of fighter. Like, his movement's fast, he's elusive, his speed of his strikes are fast, he'll throw combinations. You can see that he's got a variety of different strikes in his arsenal, from mixing in punches with kicks, with knees, flying knees, spin attacks. He looks like he's got decent cardio, so he's going to be a super fun fighter to watch. But I think Carpenter's more... I think he's more solid and well put together in regards to having a winning style. So what I mean by that is, look, in regards to the striking, I don't think he's going to be as fast as Rocha, But I think that what Carpenter lands is going to be more significant than Rocha just darting about and throwing strikes at crazy angles. I think Carpenter's a more polished fighter, I think is the right word to say. So when it comes to the striking, I think Carpenter will be at a speed disadvantage. But for where there's every disadvantage, there's always an advantage. And I think with Carpenter, that's going to be his physicality. You can see he's a big flyweight, whereas Rocha is a small flyweight as it's, as it stands. Carpenter, I think, is going to be taller. He's going to be wider, stronger, more powerful. So I think he's got opportunities here to be able to maybe tie up with Rocha. When he lands punches on Rocha, it's going to have more impact than what Rocha's landed on him. And then when it comes to the wrestling and grappling, like, Carpenter's good. I think Carpenter will be able to get Rocha down to the mat. I think he'll, even if Rocha gets up a couple of times, I think if Carpenter stays on it, eventually he's going to get some good positions on Rocha on the mat as well. It's one of these where it's like, I hate to pick against Rocha because he's genuinely talented. Like, he's super talented, athletic, fast, evasive, he's elusive, he's got good punches, he's got good kicks, he's got spin attacks, flying attacks. Like, he's actually a really well put together fighter, but I think someone that's just stoic and more polished is going to be able to beat him, which is what Carpenter is. I think Carpenter's skill set matches up quite well, but like I say, Carpenter takes less chances. It's more of a winning style. And again, like I say, it sucks to pick against Rocha because I think Rocha's going to be an instant fan favourite. I think people are going to really want to see him fight. I think he's going to win a ton of fights in the UFC as well. It's just in this fight on his UFC debut, I just think Carpenter's probably a bit more well put together. And for those reasons, I'm picking Clayton Carpenter to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. So once again, and as always, thank you for everybody tuning in, whether you're on YouTube or listening on one of the streaming platforms like Spotify or Amazon Music, Apple Music. And if you are on one of the streaming platforms and you do want a little bit of a conversation, then I do always try and get back to the replies on the YouTube comments. So come on to YouTube, drop a comment, tell me who you're betting on, tell me if we disagree on a pick, or if there's a little bit more information on a fighter that you can't find and you want a little bit more advice on. I'm always happy to try and, have that discussion. I am very busy throughout the weeks, but I do try and make time, a couple of hours during the week to come on and reply to anything that needs replying to. So yeah, and also if you are on YouTube, please drop a subscription onto our channel, as it always helps. And one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then you can do so at MMAplay365.com. Super affordable prices. It's $5 for one event, $10 a month, or it's $99 for the entire year. Our ethos is we want you to make the money back on the subscription that you buy from us very quickly, so then you can actually start profiting on your bets, and that's why the prices are very low. So make sure you check all that out. We've got something for absolutely every type of gambler as well. Long-term gamblers, fun gamblers, gamblers who just want to follow what I bet on, and of course we've got all the Bayes AI predictions in there as well from our UFC prediction software. That's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.